This is Pat's Probe on the Ourlads Football Network. We talk New England Patriots football as the Patriots lose again. I can't believe I'm saying this. This is sounding like my Jet show. That's not where you want to go either if you're a New England Patriot fan. But Patriots will play the Jets, ironically, on Monday Night Football, which if the two teams continue to play the way they've been playing lately, I'm not sure the rest of the nation is ready for what they're going to see, but I'm optimistic that we'll have a good game on Monday nonetheless. Evan, how's everything going?
Everything's going well, other than this 4-game losing streak that, quite frankly, doesn't look like it's going to come to an end anytime soon, except for against the Jets.
Except for, yes.
Yeah, the Patriots might get a win on Monday night, as you mentioned, but this team and the head coach is coming out and saying it at this point. The roster is not what we're used to around here in terms of depth and in terms of talent. And Bill Belichick's been the first one kind of at the forefront this week speaking that into existence. So this is no longer about media contrived narratives or anything like that. The head coach of the football team is telling you that this team is not as good as it's been in the past.
And it's something that we knew ourselves before the season began. It's what we talked about and stressed it as the season wore on. Anytime there's an injury situation as well, it exacerbates it, and that's something that you don't normally get used to when you're a winning franchise. The losing franchises, we all know, as that's what I have to kind of repeat every week to Jet fans is, well, this is what happens when you have limited talent and then you have injuries to that talent. You just don't have the depth, and then you get bad results. So even the teams that are pretty decent, they have decent talent, they could go far in the postseason if all goes well. Even if that team has some injuries or defections because of COVID, this is what you get. I still believe, though, after what we saw over those final two drives on Sunday, if the Patriots pick up where they left off on Monday night, they could get this thing going again.
That's sort of my fear, honestly, is that if you look at the way that they're going, especially on offense, I thought that some of it, Josh McDaniels this morning said was kind of game plan, the designed rollouts and the bootlegs. They kind of saw the Titans, the Jets even a little bit, have some success doing those types of things against Buffalo over the last couple of weeks. And so they were able to feast on some of those things. But you saw a lot more RPOs. You saw a lot more read option type of plays from the Patriots. You saw design rollouts, cutting the field in half, making it, basically a defined read for Cam Newton where he's going to one or maybe two receivers in a progression and that's it, not having him sit back there like we discussed last week and reading the entire field and going through a full field progression like he's Tom Brady.
Yeah.
They were doing different things with him to get him to simplify his reads and simplify his process, and it really paid off. So I think that they have, in a scary way, I think for a lot of Patriots fans that are hoping for a top 10 draft pick to kind of reboot this team on the fly, they have the ability, especially with the back half of their schedule not being as difficult as the front half of the schedule, to get to a 8-8, 7-9 type of record where on paper they might look a lot more acceptable to the public on the outside, right? This isn't a complete disaster if they finish the season 8-8, but privately they're going to know, and we're all going to know that they're very far away still from a Super Bowl contender, and now they're sitting with the 18th pick in the draft instead of the 6th pick in the draft, and then what do you really do?
Well, look, at least on Monday night, if you lose, it's really over. Where if you win, and at least it looks like it's a win with progress, like you said with the schedule, even if the Patriots end up getting in as, say, the 7th seed and take on the 2nd seed Kansas City Chiefs, that could very well be a good matchup for the New England Patriots. So, yeah, so I get what you're saying, but I think what you probably want as a fan is one way or another. You probably want to find out one way or another the next couple of weeks. So, are we really in this? Because if I get invested with this team, then I'm going to be invested, and I'm going all the way. Or maybe it's better off we just lose to the Jets, for crying out loud, and then we know it's really over. And we can start rebuilding for the future.
Yeah, I think the other sort of side of it that kind of goes with that is that if you sort of invest in this team, or if you in the let's say the opposite direction, if you sell off pieces here at the deadline in a couple of hours, and you trade a Stephon Gilmore, you trade Joe Tooney,
Yeah, it's
you
true.
trade some of these veteran players, are you truly going to get a fair evaluation of the players that are still on the team the rest of the way? If you want to be in a situation, let's say the Patriots are not in the playoff picture come week 16 or 17, what are you really going to learn about Jared Stidham if they do end up turning it over to Stidham later in the year to see what he can do? What are you going to learn about him when his left guard is gone? He's throwing to the guys he's throwing to. There's probably going to be other injuries that are going to take other guys off the field, and he's basically working with like a JV offense. What is he really going to be able to succeed in that situation? Is he really going to be able to succeed in that environment? So similarly on the defense side of the ball, they got rookies, they got second-year players that they're trying out in different spots. Kyle Duggar and Josh Uche and Chase Winovich, and are those all those guys? Yeah, it would be great to see them play more here down the stretch. I think because that is one thing that I do think they should do. But if you're going to start, if you conduct a fire sale here at the trade deadline, then are you truly going to understand if those players are good or not based off of a team that's a 4-12 football team? It's very difficult to get that clear read on what the future holds for certain guys on the roster that they really like if they don't have the pieces around them to make it so that it's at least a serviceable unit.
Well, look, if the Patriots were to lose on Monday night, I think what they should probably do is turn it over to Justin Stidham as quick as possible. Jarrett Stidham as soon as possible, because you do want to find out what you have with him, and I don't think you could find out even in a couple of games with a full roster what you're going to get. I don't know if Stidham's a guy that the Patriots. I don't think no matter what they get, and I don't expect Stidham, even if he were to play in a couple of weeks the rest of the season, he's going to turn it on with this offense and he's going to be the man. I don't think it's possible. The offense doesn't suit him. But it is important to know what you have, no question about it. Either way, if the Patriots get a top 10 pick, I think you feel pretty confident that they're going after a quarterback. And it's not going to be Lawrence. You're probably not going to get Fields. So you're looking at a couple other guys. Maybe you got the kid from BYU. That's a possibility. Yeah. I know they're talking about the FCS quarterback. That's tricky.
Right.
But better find out sooner or later, and I just think that, and I don't know if you agree with me, but if Stidham plays, I just don't think this is the right offense for him anyway.
Yeah, his Auburn offense was not really the right offense for him either.
Yeah, that's true.
It's kind of ironic. The Auburn offense was supposed to be a Cam Newton type of quarterback, and the Patriots offense has Cam Newton and a Tom Brady type of offense, right? So it's all kind of jumbled up. I think with Stidham, the one thing that it's really difficult for me to evaluate on him is, first of all, the sample size is absolutely tiny. It's not a good sample size. He's thrown almost as many interceptions as he's thrown completions at this point of his career. But most of that is coming in mop-up duty. Most of it is after a week as the backup and not as the first-string quarterback. Yeah. So I'm just interested to see if they do eventually go that direction. And I still think that they are leaning towards making a run at the playoffs here and not going in that direction. But if they do end up making that move, then I want to see Jared Stidham with a full week of preparation as the starter, with the starting offense around him, when he's not already down 3 touchdowns. What does he look like when the situation is clean for him coming into the game as the starting quarterback? Not necessarily in, garbage time mop-up type of duty when they're already down a couple of scores. That's what you need to get a proper evaluation of the player. I think grading him on his performance against Kansas City this year or last year, he came in that Jets game towards the end of the game and threw that pick 6 to Jamal Adams. I don't know how much of that is really worth taking, because it's a completely different situation than the game plan being crafted around a specific player.
And as far as the playoffs are concerned, really at this point in time, you're looking at Cleveland, the Raiders, and Miami. Those are the teams that you're probably going to have to figure, because it's Baltimore and Pittsburgh. It's also going to be Indianapolis and Tennessee. I mean, that's the likely scenario, and then the Chiefs and the Bills. So those are the 3 teams. And when you're thinking of those 3 teams, you are saying, well, wait a second. Sure, we have a chance. I mean, with the Browns, they're not. You can't trust that the Browns are going to have a great second half without Beckham. They had one game without Beckham. Look at how they looked. The Dolphins are playing a rookie quarterback, and you can't count. And the Patriots have the tiebreaker on the Raiders. So yeah, no doubt about it. I know Belichick's not even thinking about the 2021 draft. He definitely is thinking about this season. And that's why Monday night's game is important to find out whether or not this team really has what it takes. And again, I'm not talking about an ugly win. I'm talking about a win that shows us that this team is ready to actually play better. And because who's after the Jets?
Baltimore.
There you go. So
yeah,
with their running game, that spells trouble because that's been the killer.
That's the one game, in the second half here of the slate. They got Baltimore. They got a game against Arizona here in New England. They have to they have a back-to-back in LA, which they'll probably spend the entire week out there with the Chargers and the Rams. One is a Sunday night game, and then the next one's a Thursday night game. I forget which order it is, Rams first or Chargers first. But those are the three games, really. Arizona, obviously Baltimore on Sunday night, a week from Sunday, and then I would say the Rams, the Los Angeles Rams. Those three games are the ones that are sort of toss-ups, but are really kind of leaning more towards the opponent, I would say, in terms of how they're playing right now. But the other five games, are four against the AFC East, and then one against the Houston Texans, and one against the Chargers as well. Who are those are winnable games on paper for the Patriots, and you just saw them go up against Buffalo, and they only lost by a field goal in Buffalo. Now they come here, it might be a different game. They beat Miami in week 1. The Jets have not won a game yet this year. So those 4 games against the AFC East look extremely winnable. And I just feel like Belichick, for as much of his shortcomings as a GM this year and his drafting in recent years, I think has taken a ton of criticism and a ton of heat in the market. He's just good enough that he might be able to piece this thing together to drag this team to 8-8. And with the 7th wild card spot, I think now that might be good enough to get them in the postseason.
Yeah, it could be. But of course, we all know what the problem with that is if you don't get to the play, or even if you do and you're 1 and out.
Right. The problem is you're in purgatory, right?
Yeah.
You're in that 15 to 20 range of the draft where you're too far down to draft a quarterback. You're probably too far down to draft like a Jalen Waddle or really a game-changing wide receiver at the top of the draft. I would think Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, those guys are probably going to already be off the board. So where do you go talent-wise if you're picking at 18 versus if you're picking at 8 is a very drastic drop off in the draft that it manifests itself every single year that's a pretty big landslide as you start to go down the first round of just, the difference between getting, let's say like a CeeDee Lamb and getting a Kyle Duggar, that's just a huge kind of difference for the franchise of just talent level once you get outside that top 20.
All right, let's take a look at the game, and really, it's interesting. I noticed by some point, middle to late first half, that the Patriots had 3 of their possessions. I don't know if it was all 3, but it was 3 of their possessions ended on a 3rd down run. And we've talked about this before. Josh likes the 3rd down runs. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it was unusual that it happened quite a bit early in the game.
Yeah, so they ran, I think it was 10 3rd down plays in the entire game. 7 of them were running plays. Now, some of that's obviously about down and distance, but the ones that you're talking about in particular, one was a 3rd and 12. There was another one later on in the game that was a 3rd and 10 where they ran the football. Now, the good news is if you're a Patriots fan is that 6 out of those 7 run calls that they made had some sort of an option element involved. It was either a read option or it was an RPO. And it just so happened that the way that the defense played it, the decision by the quarterback was to run the ball and not put it in the air. So for one, on one hand, you kind of sit here and you say, okay, that's way too conservative. And I think that there is a really good argument to be made that, especially in the first half against Buffalo, they way too conservative because really what ended up happening was they ran the ball on a 3rd and 12. They ran the ball again on a 2nd and 20, and they just didn't take enough
Yeah.
chances with an offense that they have where they're not going to put up a ton of points. You have to pick and choose your battles a little bit more than that. And then at the end of the half, they kicked a field goal on 3rd down with 12 seconds left instead of taking another shot at the end zone. And Belichick's sort of rationale for that was that he didn't think the 3rd down play was going to have a high probability of ending in a touchdown. And he felt that there was a higher probability of them screwing up that situation
Yeah.
with a turnover or a
Sure.
sack, like we saw against Kansas City. So that speaks volumes to me and to everybody about the confidence that Belichick has in his offense. That a 12-second left in the half, 3rd down, we're out there at training camp, and that's a situation that we have heard Belichick bark out a million times, right? You have the ball, there's 2 minutes left in the half, you have no timeouts, you got to drive the field and get points before the half. That's the Patriots run those scenarios in practice all the time. And despite all that practice, despite all those reps in those types of situations, they decided to kick a field goal on 3rd down. Now, on the one hand, it kept the game close with their defense doing what their defense does against the pass. They're able to keep games close. At the end of the game with Cam with the ball in his hands, and that's kind of what you would take. But on the other hand, it definitely puts them behind the 8 ball a lot of the time, that they're not more aggressive, especially early downs, 1st and 2nd downs. They are running the football more than just about any other team in the league, and you can tell why, because it's clearly the strength
Sure.
of their offense. But we know now from the math of it, from the analytics people, that running the ball that often and not being so conservative with your play calling on 3rd down and before the half, and not taking those chances when they're presented to you, that can run into a lot of issues with the scoreboard, and that's why they're only averaging 19 points a game right now.
Well, look, I mean, and this goes back to the skill position talent that the team has. When you're in that spot, you better have some skill in order, not just for Cam and for the offensive line, but do you have the playmakers? Do you have the receivers that you feel confident that Cam can get the ball into the end zone and a player can make a play? And I think the answer to that is no. We've talked about that enough. I think the combination of all that, I can completely understand why Bill made that call.
Yeah, and you kind of put that on the fact as well that the probabilities are on a 3rd and 12, for instance, like the one that they ran the ball in the first half, the odds of the Patriots picking up a 3rd and 12 through the air is about
Yeah,
10%, maybe.
exactly.
If you're
Yeah.
being generous. If you're being generous, well, I'll give them closer to 20%, because that's probably around league average right there. And the odds of them throwing a pick or them getting a sack that knocks them out of favorable field position, all of that is probably higher than the probability of them actually converting in that
Yep.
situation. So what McDaniel said this morning about it was that it's a couple of different things. One, it's just the best way that they feel to pick up those yards, and sometimes that's going to be on the ground because that is the strength of their offense. And secondly, it's about complementary football, and it's making sure that you don't put yourself in a negative situation where you throw a pick that's run back for a touchdown, that's run back 30 yards and flips the field position, and then you get that punt, pin them deep. They did pin them on the 8-yard line on the ensuing punt, and then you play defense, and that's sort of the complementary style of game that the Patriots feel like they need to play to be competitive.
All right, now let's move to the second half after the Diggs play. And he was quiet for the most part, but he made the one big play in the second half to go up 8. The Patriots were then able to work out good field position and end up with the ball at the 37 of Buffalo to start their drive. And that led to the Harris 21-yard touchdown run. They get the 2-point conversion. And all of a sudden, it's a tie football game with 3:03 left in the third quarter. And that's when the Patriots decided an onside kick. It was the first time in the entire game that the Patriots showed some aggressiveness. It was like,
Right.
well, we're going to be very conservative. I mean, on play call, the play call, everything was conservative. And then they go out of whack and try an onside kick, which nobody's really trying anymore, let alone, I mean, I guess if you're going to try one to be successful, this is when you have the best chance, when they're not expecting it. I get that. But it still was, considering how hard it was for the Patriots to finally get in the end zone, that was a risky move, and it did not pay off.
Yeah, that's really the head scratcher, right? Is that conservative, conservative, conservative. You're punting. They punted a ball down 8 points in the third quarter at about the Buffalo 40-yard line, which to the analytics people is a big slap in the face, right? You don't do that in that position, and then they onside kick it. And Belichick's reasoning, of course, was that they were trying to steal a possession. But what are the you kind of have to weigh again the probabilities of recovering the onside kick versus, let's say, going for it on a fourth down, or putting the ball in the air on a 3rd and 12, or taking another shot at the end zone before a half. Are all of those higher
Yeah,
probability than the
yeah.
onside kick? I don't know. Now, obviously, the Patriots, their sort of reasoning behind it was, one, they were trying to steal a possession. Number two, they claim that they saw something on tape out of the way that Buffalo covers kicks, that they thought that they were going to have a chance at the ball there. And the guy just made a heads up play. The guy that recovered it, just he was Johnny on the spot, and he was aware and made a heads up play there. Maybe Buffalo was kind of expecting it a little bit, given how the Patriots offense was going. But I think all these kind of coaching decisions and stuff like that are just, Belichick looks at it that being conservative in that way and then picking your spots with aggressiveness is going to keep the game close with an offense that's not going to score 35 a game. That's the way he's looking at it, right? Is that the defense is the stronger unit, that they can keep the game, within reach, and then they can kind of play the cards out at the fourth quarter and see if they can make enough plays to win it. And I don't necessarily disagree that it's not necessarily a terrible way of looking at it, but I think that the better way of looking at it, at least based off the numbers, would be to be more aggressive when you have possession of the football, and kind of let go of all that sort of tricks and the sort of stealings of the possessions with the onside kicks. I don't think we'll see many more surprise onside kicks from the Patriots this season. And I don't think that any of these coaching decisions in the game are these are in game things that went
Yeah.
wrong, but I don't know if those are why the big picture is where we're at 2-5. I think that personnel
Yes.
shortcomings and roster shortcomings have much more to do with their record than just Bill deciding to attempt an onside kick.
Well, after that, though, the game really picked up. And that's because the Patriots' offense in those last two drives were as good as any back to back offensive drives the Patriots have had since Seattle. And they were
Correct.
able to come down. I thought it was one of their best drives, period, in weeks. That was the touchdown drive that tied it. There was good passing, there was good running. The game was tied. Unfortunately, the Patriots let the Bills come down, kick a field goal, but there was still 4 minutes left, and the Patriots did kind of what they were doing in the previous drive. They marched right back down again, and we had Cam fumbling to a guy that nobody knows, Justin Zimmer, just to make it
Right.
even worse. But interesting that, the Patriots actually got a break too when the rookie Davis dropped the ball in the end zone. And you kind of felt that when New England was marching down, that maybe this is it. They got their break. There's enough time. Looks like they're going to have an opportunity not just to kick a field goal, but to score a touchdown. And it was all taken away by one strip.
Right. And that's sort of the story of the season for New England in some of these close games. Belichick said this after the game. They've had 3 game-winning drives stall. They've had the ball in their hands. They've made progress. They had 3 drives stall at the Seattle 1, the Denver 14, and now the Buffalo 19, and are 0-3 in those types of opportunities. And again, that, speaking about the situation at the end of the half, that situation at the end of the game is another thing that the Patriots drill all the time at practice, right? 2 minutes, down a field goal. You need to come away with at least 3, but we'd like 6. Run your offense. What are you doing? Where are you going? And they got all the way down there in all 3 instances. And what a big difference this season would be. The narratives and everything, just the whole season, would be completely different if Cam Newton punches it in from the 1 in Seattle and completes the pass in N'Keal Harry against Denver and doesn't fumble the ball against Buffalo. And I know people are listening to this and they're saying, what if, what if, what if? That'd be nice to, change all the what ifs. But that's the margin of error that this Patriots team has right now between wins and losses. And in years past, they were able to execute in those key situations with Tom Brady because he's Tom Brady. And now we're sort of learning both media and a fan base in New England that when you don't have the talent and when you don't have that late game execution, that a lot of these close games go
That's
against you.
right.
And that's the difference between
That's
being
right.
5-2 and 2-5. And that's where the Patriots are right now.
All right, now let's just wrap up by going over some key individual notes. The rookie Josh Uche made his NFL debut with
Yeah.
13 snaps, and you mentioned Duggar before. He didn't play again.
No, he did not play. He's got an ankle issue. They're hoping that it's just short term. He hasn't been on the injured reserve yet, but you know how ankle injuries can go. You know those are tough injuries for athletes. You know, can't plant, can't cut. You know all that kind of stuff.
All right, and then also Chase Winovich was held to 5 snaps. Yet
Right.
I noticed that Terrence Brooks had 100% of the defensive snaps. Which I was that
Yeah.
again, you're always going to get one of these players every week that the Patriots are going to run out there because of matchups and things of that nature. But yeah, Chase Winovich with only 5 snaps.
Right. So Josh Uche, he's a big part of their second half of the season because what's happening right now is that, I wrote about this today. Belichick's comments about how the cap situation and the opt outs kind of led us to this point with the Patriots. The biggest sort of example of that is Jawan Bentley, their inside linebacker, who is playing on something like 85% of the snaps right now. Coming into the season, he was thought as a first down role player next to Dante Hightower,
Yep.
somebody that was a complement to Hightower in the middle of the defense as a run defender. Only going to play mostly on first and second down, right? 35% of the snaps, something like that. Not a ton in coverage. But so far, he's had to play a huge role in the Patriots defense, calling plays and being out there on the field in multiple personnel groupings. And he's getting exposed. He has the fifth worst grade among starting linebackers in Pro Football Focus's grading. He's giving up 16 yards per catch when he's targeted in coverage. It's just he is getting picked on every single week by the opposition. And Uche is the guy that they drafted in the second round who can play on the line, off the line. He's a little bit more versatile. He's certainly a little bit more athletic than Jawan Bentley. That I think they're hoping by Thanksgiving in a couple of weeks is going to be able to take a lot of that responsibility off Bentley so they can start using Bentley more as a situational player. So he's a really big one for me because their early down defense right now is 27th in the league in EPA. They're one of the worst defenses on first and second down in the entire league. And what's happening is because they're so bad on first and second down, they can't get teams into passing situations on second and long and where they can create negative plays with their secondary. To get into third and mediums or third and longs, their secondary is still extremely dominant. But the problem is they just aren't in those situations often enough because they can't stop anybody on first and second down.
Yep.
So I think Uche is a really big role player for them moving forward that can hopefully, play a little bit better in space, be able to rush the passer a little bit more effectively than Jawan Bentley. So in passing downs on first and second down, they have a little bit more of an effective player. Now with Winovich, this is one that we continue to ask the coaches about, both Belichick's, Bill and Steve. Steve Belichick is calling plays for the Patriots defense, and he's the outside linebackers coach for the Patriots, which is obviously Winovich's position. So he's the guy that I really wanted to, kind of get some answers from today. And they both insist, both Belichick's, that there's nothing wrong with Winovich, that he's not doing anything wrong to lead to this decrease in snap and playing time. And really, the biggest thing that's happening is that because they're getting gashed so badly on in the running game, they feel Winovich is more of a situational pass rushing talent, a guy that's 250 pounds out on the edge, is a little bit undersized, and they don't think that he's the answer for them against the run or against stopping teams on first and second down because he really wants to pin his ears back and get up the field and get after the quarterback, and that's really not what they're missing right now out of their defense.
All right. I mean, that there's nothing wrong with that explanation. Maybe it is ironic though that the decrease in snaps happened after the San Francisco game and the clip on Jimmy G.
Right. I think the biggest thing is with Winovich is that it's clear, regardless of what kind of player he is, whether he's a pass rusher or every down roll type of guy, he is clearly one of their more physically gifted and talented players in the front seven. Right? in terms of just pure talent and pure athleticism as a football player, he's clearly one of their better guys. So to not be able to find a spot for him is really frustrating. So the one thing that I threw out, because I actually wrote about Winovich last weekend going into this game, the one thing I threw out was Winovich potentially learning or off the line role for this defense because they are so thin at inside linebacker and Jawan Bentley is getting exposed so much that maybe Winovich's future with New England to be a 3-down player is actually playing first and second down off the line of scrimmage and then coming on the line of scrimmage on 3rd down as an edge rusher, sort of like how they would use Hightower. And that's kind of where I'm at now with Winnow, because they definitely do not feel like he is sturdy enough, strong enough out on the edge to be a first and second down player for them at that position. And what they do when he does get out there is they allow him to shoot gaps and get up the field and be a penetrator, and teams are running right at him knowing that he's going to be aggressive and do that exact thing, and it's exposing them that way. So they've leaned heavily on John Simon, Tashawn Bauer, who's a practice squad guy that they called up. He's kind of been a more sturdy presence. He's closer to 260, and he's a little bit thicker built than Winovich, and so he's been a little bit kind of steadier there in that position. So but at the end of the day, it's like what I said at the beginning of this, is that Winovich, if you were to grade the Patriots roster, if you would rank them by Madden rankings or whatever, he's one of their 7 best players in their front 7 on the roster talent-wise, and they need to find a place to play him, whether it's on the edge or in the middle of the defense.
Yeah, especially if the team, you would hope as a fan, if the team looks like the playoffs are just a dream, it's not going to happen, then that shouldn't matter. Just get him out on the field and play him. Also, a couple of things I found interesting was Olszewski with 42 snaps and only one active.
I don't think he was targeted.
What's that?
And he wasn't targeted.
No, and I guess he was taking over the role of the backup tight end then. The number 2 tight end that doesn't get targeted because there was only one active tight end for the game.
Correct. And, there were a couple of instances where he was open and I thought Cam might have been able to get him the football, but we play this game every week with Cam where we're kind of just like watching the tape back and saying, oh, there's an open receiver here, there's an open receiver there, but you kind of have to look at the whole picture and understand the process that, first of all, there was pressure in his face. Second of all, he was on the backside of the progression. Third of all, this is Gunnar Olszewski's first action of the entire season, really extended action, and does Cam have that level of trust yet to be able to throw to him the football down the field? They did use him a couple of different times to sort of stretch the defense. He is a little bit more explosive than, let's say, like a Jakobi Meyers, so he can get off the line a little bit more than that. They did use him on a jet sweep, which was something that I've been waiting for. He's a solid punt returner, and he shows good skill as a punt returner, good ball security, ability to kind of get up the field north-south quickly. So I thought those jet motions would be a really nice sort of wrinkle with him as well. So they did that for the first time. I thought in terms of the game plan for Josh McDaniels and the design of the offense, some of the situational play calling we've all pointed to was a little bit suspect, especially in the first half. But the design of how they were running the offense, a lot of read option heavy, RPO heavy stuff, a lot of bootleg action or moving pockets to cut the field in half for Cam Newton. When he did throw the ball from more like a traditional drop back style, it was mostly from shotgun. They only ran really one under center play action type of play, 1 or 2 of those. It was mostly Cam Newton type of stuff. And he played a lot better as a result. This was his best game by far since week 2. So I think that there were some things definitely that they can build on, that they're not going to score 40 a game. They're not going to be the 07 Patriots, but they might be able to score enough on offense to remain competitive if they keep to that passing script where there's very few plays where there are these long, drawn-out progressions where Cam has to go 1, 2, 3 in 2.5 seconds. They got to be able to kind of simplify it for him, and I thought they did a nice job of that against Buffalo.
Well, one of the players that Cam could take advantage of is, the Jets have their own Bentley, and that is Hewitt. So he's been on the field, I believe, for every defensive snap this season. And I'm not exaggerating.
Yeah.
So now you know why the Jets.
They played Neville Hewitt before too when he was with Miami, and then he was with the Chargers believe, and they loved getting their linebackers or their running backs, excuse me, matched up against him in coverage. So I assume that will be another sort of sticking point for them this week, is trying to get some of those players. And you listen, this game against the Jets should not be close. Even the Patriots at 2-5 that are clearly hampered by a lot of different circumstances and don't have Tom Brady anymore are a superior team to this Jets team. There might be only one team in the league that has worse skill position players than the Patriots, and it's probably the Jets. You know, everybody talks about how bad the Patriots receivers are. It's probably like the Patriots 31st in weapons and the Jets 32nd, you know, something like that.
The big
so,
difference is going to be whether or not Perryman's going to play and Crowder's going to play. Because the Jets this season, they have, for one game, they have not had Crowder, Mims, and Perryman play at the same time. So now Perryman,
I'm sure.
What's that?
Patriots fans would have Denzel Mims on the roster right now. A lot of Patriots fans.
Mims has only played a couple of games, but he looks like the real deal. So, but they got to get Crowder. See, if they got Crowder, Mims, and Perryman out there on Monday night, and it happens to be first time they have them all together, then we'll see. But that hasn't happened yet, and that's a big reason why their offense also isn't very good. And then lastly, Rex had 32 offensive snaps to Damian Harris's 20. Was that more of a second half we're behind thing? Because Harris, you would think that his numbers just tell the story. He's the better runner. Shouldn't he get more opportunities to run the ball, or is he getting enough opportunities to run the ball?
I think he's getting enough. I think it's more situational than anything, right? You know, they really view Rex as sort of a sub package back. You know, he's your third down guy, he's your passing situation guy, and then Damian Harris is your early down lead back. So Damian Harris carried it 16 times. He's a really good runner, but I'm telling you right now that the story about that rushing attack is the offensive line. They have just, in that Buffalo game specifically, and whenever this line is fully intact and they don't get blown off the scoreboard like they did against San Francisco, they are the best rushing team in the league. They're number one in EPA. They're number one in success rate. They're 3 in yards per game. They're 3 in rushing average. They're top 5 in every single rushing category all the way down the line. Now, granted, that's only led to them scoring 19 points a game, and it's not exactly, they're not running it like gangbusters to the way they're scoring a ton of points. But in terms of effectiveness, this is the best rushing team in the league when their offensive line is intact. And Damian Harris is reaping a lot of those benefits. They ran 2 counter plays where they got massive double teams on the left side. They get a huge pull from Shaq Mason. They got a good fullback in Jakob Johnson to lead through the hole. And they're just old school smash mouth football coming downhill right at you. And other teams have not been able to stop it. No matter how many people they put in the box, these teams are walking everybody up to the line of scrimmage. There's nobody on the outside that anybody's afraid of here in New England. And they're playing 8, 9, sometimes 10 guys within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage trying to stack the box against this rushing attack. And even still, they're still able to run the football effectively because of how good that line is. And because, of course, they have a numbers advantage with Cam Newton being able to run as well that they use to their advantage too. So it's an elite rushing attack. The issue has never been about that. The passing game is what it is. It's really the defensive side of the ball now that if you just want to look at it from a record standpoint and why the Patriots are 2-5, they were expecting their defense to be a lot better than it's been. And I think a lot of that has to do with the offseason turmoil and with the opt-outs. But they were not expecting to be among the league worst defenses in first and second down defense. And that has really led them to having issues with getting into third down. And once they do get teams into third down, like I said at the beginning, then they do create turnovers. They have 5 interceptions on third down, which is second most in the league. They're able to flip the field with their defense if they can get teams into passing situations and make teams go to the air. They just can't stop anybody on first and second down. So that's the biggest issue in terms of turning this thing around and getting back into the playoff hunt. They're not going to make a trade today for a Michael Thomas or a Julio Jones or an Adam Thielen that's going to fix their offense, right? So their offense is what it is. Defensively, they need to be able to get better if they have any chance of getting back into the mix here.
About an hour and 15 minutes to go, and nothing's come across the teletype on your end?
No, nothing's come across, and I don't expect anything to. They've been shopping Stephon Gilmore. I think what they're sort of doing with Gilmore, I actually really like, and they're trying to think outside the box a little bit about it because I think the offers that they've gotten for him for just straight draft capital has been like a second round pick, maybe a second and a fifth if they put in a sweetener. And I think the Patriots realize that they're not a second and a fifth round pick away from being contenders. They need a stud. So what they're looking for with Gilmore is actually trading Gilmore for a player and not just a pick. So there are some rumors out there about some wide receivers that maybe that could make sense for those types of swaps. But that's where the Patriots are at right now. And unless something drastically changes on the Gilmore front in the next hour, they're going to stand pat. They're going to kind of evaluate their roster the rest of the way. And this offseason, that's sort of the hard reset button with a bunch of salary cap space and things coming off the books, and then hopefully a war chest of assets. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe around the draft or the start of free agency in March, you see Gilmore traded for a player, not just a draft pick, but a wide receiver, a tight end, somebody that's going to come in here and help the passing
All
game.
right, sounds good. How about let's see, wide receivers? How about the Browns send you Beckham and Njoku for Gilmore?
That's my that's the trade that I think every Patriots fan should be crossing their fingers and hoping for, because as frustrating as it would be to see Gilmore walk, it does sound like that's happening one way or another, whether they trade him or they let him play out his contract and then he walks in free agency, because he wants that one more payday, right? And he's not going to get, we've discussed this, he's not going to get that from Bill Belichick at 31 years old. So I think the move is to look for something like that, like an Odell Beckham type of trade, or like potentially an Adam Thielen type of trade, where a team feels like, okay, we have an area of strength, or
Sure.
we have a disgruntled player in Odell. You have an area of strength in cornerback, and the Patriots against Buffalo didn't played without Gilmore, and were still able to hold down Josh Allen relatively well. And that was with J.C. Jackson and Jason McCourty and Jonathan Jones. And then, of course, they have Jawan Williams, who they drafted in the second round last year, who they like. So they have tons of depth at that position. So you trade from an area of strength at cornerback to improve an area of weakness at wide receiver, and everybody's happy. And I think that that's a scenario that is far more likely at this point than the Patriots shipping Gilmore out just for a draft
Which
pick
one of the
compensation.
receivers for the Cowboys would make the most sense?
The one everybody keeps on talking about is Gallup. They can't keep
No, nor
everybody
should
in
they. I mean,
Dallas.
they
They've
need
already
other help
paid,
like cornerback.
right, right. They've already paid Amari Cooper. They've already paid Zeke. They're going to pay Dak. So the guy that seems like the odd man out would be Michael Gallup, who's a nice player. I would like to see a draft
Yeah,
pick
yeah,
and
sure.
Gallup coming back to New England,
Or
not
maybe
just
Dalton
Gallup for a
Schultz.
guy like Gilmore. Right, maybe a blocking tight end that isn't Ryan
No.
Izzo. Um, and that might actually end up working out for the Patriots, because Gallup is sort of that explosive downfield contested catch guy on the outside that can do some of those things that the
Yep.
Patriots are missing. So I wouldn't hate Gallup. I think the fans, if it was Gilmore for Gallup in a fifth or something like that, I don't think it would go over particularly well. But I think that that's the type of outside the box thinking the Patriots need to have, because they're not going to be able to add in the draft at wide receiver the way that other teams can. They're not Pittsburgh. They're not one of these teams that goes out there and evaluates wide receiver talent so
No.
easily. So get somebody that's already been
Yes.
proven in the league to be an
Yep.
absolute stud, because you can't draft anybody. They're not going to take a guy in the second round at wide receiver that's going to be, the next great wide receiver for the Patriots for the next 10 years. They just don't have any success in any real precedent of being able to do that as an organization. So you might as well get it from a pro
Yeah.
personnel standpoint instead of college
And maybe Tampa
personnel.
Bay, because if Antonio Brown were to work out and he comes back next year, they're probably going to do something with Evans or Godwin. I don't think they'll keep
Right,
them all.
right.
And, that would be another
That's
interesting trade partner.
a lot. That's the thing, is I think there's a lot of scenarios here where they can make that sort of move, and it's not the way that it's usually done in the NFL. It's kind of, it's not a league like the MLB or the NBA where we see a ton of player for
Yeah.
player trades, but I think this might be the case where it actually makes a ton of
All right,
sense.
Evan. So next Tuesday, which is our normal day anyway, we will
Yes,
talk about the Patriots Jet game, which should be a lot of fun for you.
should be a fun.
Because I have to talk about that game twice, which I'm not looking forward to next week. But anyway, yeah,
That's tough.
it's one of those years. Hey, you know what? I just look at it as, you keep losing. I'm in a kind of a no lose situation now. You lose, I'm another week closer to getting Lawrence. That's it.
There you
look
go.
at it that way. And the Jets will finally get their Tom Brady. So, except they'll have to get theirs with the first overall pick in the draft, not the way the Patriots did. All right, Evan, thanks a lot as always. Enjoy the game next week. Hopefully, maybe, who knows, maybe there's some trade deadline news as well, and we'll talk to you again soon.